Hi, this is Marshall Toplansky.
And Joel Kotkin.
And welcome to the Feudal Future podcast. If you're listening, it means you're interested in creating a better future, one that values diverse discussion and preserves opportunity for the middle and working classes.
This is why we started the show, to bring together ideas and people that challenge the notion of a hierarchical, socially stagnant, and centrally programmed future. Maybe you've experienced the rising costs of home ownership, diminishing job prospects, or the burden of over-regulation and increasingly censorship. This is happening in cities everywhere, and we recognize the need for new action.
For this reason, we created the Beyond Feudalism Facebook group, a place for you to connect and share resources with like-minded people. Here you'll be able to ask questions, network, and share your own stories and ideas on how we can bring opportunity and common sense back into our civil discourse and governance.
Consider this a hub for all things feudal, where we'll be sharing insights from our recent Beyond Feudalism report with Chapman University, clips and highlights from the podcast, and links to related content on topics such as housing, education, energy, transportation, and entrepreneurship. Much of our focus has been so far on California, but we expect to see this work and apply this work to conditions around the world.
Well, as you can probably tell, we're not too excited about the path we're currently on as a society, but we are hopeful for what's possible. And if we can better understand what's happening and build momentum to overcome the trends, so much the better.
So we encourage you to join the Facebook group via the link below to get involved and keep up-to-date information on all new developments. And for more information, my new book, The Coming of Neo-Feudalism, outlines everything that's happening and where we need to change. The link to that is also in the show description.
So thank you very much for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show.
This is Joel Kotkin.
And this is Marshall Toplansky.
And you're listening to the Feudal Future podcast. Our society is being rapidly reduced to a feudal state, a process now being exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Millions of small businesses are near extinction. Millions more are losing their jobs, and many others will be stuck in the status of propertyless serfs. The big winners have been the expert class of the clerisy, and most of all, the tech oligarchs, who benefit as people rely more on algorithms than human relationships.
With this, around the world, the middle class is becoming more squeezed than ever, and it's having profound economic, social, and spiritual implications. Here on the show, we're having conversations with business, government, and citizen leaders like you to get to the core of these issues and explore how we can work together to form a better future than the one we're headed towards. Hello, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Feudal Future podcast. I'm Marshall Toplansky.
I'm Joel Kotkin.
And today we're going to be talking about the coronavirus vaccines. And with us, we have two really great people who are involved very closely in this. First is Joe Payne, who is president and CEO of Arcturus, which is a pharmaceutical company based in San Diego, and Tony Lemus, who is a longtime collaborator with us and researcher who happens to also be very active in the biomedical device area and the use of AI in discovery for drugs and for medical devices. Welcome to both of you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we'd love to start off this is perfect timing as we're doing this. This is just before Thanksgiving is when we're recording it. And lots of really great news has come out about different companies who have vaccines who are going to be applying for emergency use permits from the FDA. But from a consumer and a general public point of view, a lot of this is kind of over their heads. And I thought we would spend a little time today just talking about kind of the process. How does this all work? You know, it seems like we're used to having drugs take decades before they actually hit the market, and here we've been able to do it very quickly. How come? What's different this time around?
Well, I can definitely start. The first two to apply for approval are messenger RNA vaccines, and why they were able to move so fast. There's a few reasons, but I think before I just jump into giving the short answer, I'd like to provide a few moments to give some background, and that all of these vaccines are in the business of doing the same thing. They want to expose the body to what's called the full-length spike protein, or the spike protein. So when you see an image of the COVID-19, you see the picture of these little virus particles, you see these little spikes on the surface of the virus. That's the spike protein. And if you expose the body to the spike protein, then the body takes care of the rest. There's an immune system, they make antibodies, they make what are called T cells. And so you have humoral immunity and cellular immunity. And these, whether it's antibodies or T cells, they protect the body from the COVID-19. So we're all in the business of pretty much doing the same thing, and that's exposing the body to the spike protein. However, there's different ways to do that. Why don't you just go to a factory and make the spike protein? Well, that takes a long time, and there's impurities and processes, and it's a challenge to scale up this kind of stuff. So there's a different technology called messenger RNA. And when this messenger RNA molecule goes into a cell after you get injected, then the body makes the protein naturally. This messenger RNA molecule goes into the cell, and the body already has machinery to manufacture the antigen, this spike protein. And then the body takes care of itself. It provides an immune response to it. And this was cutting edge technology. People weren't for sure certain that it was going to work, but based on the recent results in phase 3, it's very exciting. And messenger RNA vaccine companies like Moderna and Pfizer and Arcturus are encouraged by these results. It looks like it's a great approach, but it's very quick, it's very simple, and very tiny amounts are injected in the arm. And so,
is this the first messenger RNA vaccine kind of categorically that we've had, or have there been other messenger RNA vaccines?
Other messenger RNA vaccines are being clinically evaluated for different applications, but this is the first one that's really going to be approved, and understandably so. It got some accelerated attention, resources, and appreciation because of the pandemic. So it was a great opportunity to showcase and prove out the technology. And that's, of course, great for humanity. It's great for the field of medicine, and especially for messenger RNA therapeutics and vaccines. So we take it as highly encouraging and, of course, very positive.
How close are you guys to having yours ready, your vaccine?
Well, we're in the middle of a phase 1/2 trial. We've recruited 106 people for the trial, and so far the interim results we've shared, and they're encouraging, very exciting. We've seen antibodies being generated, but where the Arcturus vaccine is different is that we're a potentially single dose or a single administration vaccine, and our dose level is very low. So the Arcturus messenger RNA technology is called self-transcribing and replicating RNA. We have an acronym for it called STAR, S-T-A-R-R. That's our trademark. So this STAR mRNA is slightly different from conventional messenger RNA. And the bottom line is that the dose level is lower, and it's a potential single shot vaccine. Those are both very important improvements, because if the dose level is lower, then the safety profile is more encouraging. And that's what we've seen, at least in our interim results, and we hope that continues. And it makes sense. If you're injecting less RNA and less delivery vehicle and less stuff, then you have a better safety response or safety profile. The other aspect,
you're running your clinical in conjunction with the Duke NUS Medical School in Singapore, right?
Correct. The Duke NUS Medical School is a combination of Duke here in the United States that people may be familiar with, and the National University of Singapore in Singapore. These two entities came together and created a third entity called Duke NUS, world leaders in pathogenic research, coronaviruses like MERS and SARS from decades ago, and now COVID-19. We're very fortunate to be working with these guys. They really know their stuff when it comes to pathogens, infectious diseases, and coronaviruses. And they were at the forefront of the disease. When it was an epidemic, before it was a pandemic, they reached out to us. They evaluated our technology, our manufacturing capabilities, and here we are. We consummated a relationship and translated this into the clinic, and we're getting very encouraging data. And now we have Pfizer and Moderna proving out messenger RNA vaccines. Thank you, guys. That's looking really positive for us. And what we're bringing to the table is a lower dose, potential single administration, and instead of a prime boost or a 2-shot vaccine. And both of those would be of interest to multiple countries.
I'm kind of interested, and Tony, I know you've been involved in the regulatory approval process here around the world. And obviously with this, Joe, you're able to see the contrast between the US approval process and the Singaporean approval process. You know, what's the state of the US approval process? Are we hopelessly mired in red tape? Are we cutting through it and doing a great job? What do you see, Tony? What's your sense overall? And then we'll get to Joe about the vaccine in particular.
I think what's really a big positive over the last 10, 15 years with computing power is the fact that our predictive analytic models for how a drug will perform, how it's designed, you can do that early on in the game. And you can assess your clinicals with a lot more data and information now to make decisions. As Joe pointed out, you have Pfizer, Moderna, they're all working on these vaccines. They're having their data put into this, what I call the cumulative data that the FDA has seen, which is going to help Joe get his product out the door and help out other people. But the models have gotten better. We have faster computing power to make predictions clinically what could happen. I think the scientists and in graduate schools and when students are learning now, they're looking at the driver variables to get an outcome, and are able to do predictions about what route to take during the experiments based on the modeling that they're able to do. What I've been observing, especially in the COVID detection space, is that I think the companies, the industrial companies that are making it, and even in the manufacturing, there's techniques being used in manufacturing to get better drug performance, to make sure, yes, you have impurities, things like that, as Joe pointed out. But I think they've leapfrogged the FDA in some areas that they're trying to catch up on right now. I think I've encountered situations where the FDA is learning a lot about the techniques they're using in manufacturing, learning about how the drug is actually put together on the manufacturing floor and how you're proving consistency of that product going out. So there's a lot of, because we're trying to get this vaccine out as fast as possible, there has to be some communication, really good, strong communication with the regulatory agencies and the drug manufacturers. I think you're seeing a lot more now than we have in the past. And as Joe pointed out, where he is in this clinical stage, I mean, Joe could probably tell you how long it would have taken in the past to get this out the door. Now it's gone faster because there's panic. And I wish a couple of products I worked on in the past had this panic. I could have got them out faster.
And Joe, what are you seeing? Is it all hands on deck? Is the FDA being?
Yeah, I think in general, well, there's multiple regulatory agencies. I'm glad you brought that up. That the FDA is clearly a highly respected regulatory agency globally, but there are other regulatory agencies that garner respect, of course. And the Health Sciences Authority in Singapore is a fantastic group of people, very motivated to get a vaccine safely and effectively to their people. You can understand that. And with respect to bureaucracy or red tape, I don't really have a straightforward comment there. I think that the FDA is clearly working tirelessly to make sure that they can have U.S. citizens gain access to this vaccine. And they've really done a great job making sure that we don't cut corners that shouldn't be cut, because that's always a concern. And so I think they've done an excellent job. I wish I could say things more controversial than that, but I really do commend what they've done.
Now, I have a question, which is on the delivery side, which is, what do we do if there are 3 or 4 or 5 different vaccines? I mean, as a kid, I remember the polio vaccine, and there was the polio vaccine. Everybody took the same thing. How do we negotiate this when, the layman and even most physicians can't tell you this one's better or that one's better? How have you been talking to your colleagues at these other companies about how to handle that?
Oh, and I think it's very prophetic, Joel, but I think that's what's going to happen. You're going to get multiple vaccines that are safe and effective. That's a great problem, and it's exactly what we need for humanity. But when it happens, people are going to move their lens. Right now, everyone's laser focused on efficacy. Does it work? That's all I care about. When can I inject it into me, right? People aren't asking about safety. They're not asking about distributability, cold chain, logistics, manufacturing challenges. Does it work, and when can I get it? And that's the right focus right now. But if there's 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 vaccines that are safe and effective, people are going to be shifting their attention away from efficacy because they all work. They're going to want to know which one is the safest, which one is the most stable or the most easily distributed, which one is the more convenient, which one is higher compliance. Like a single shot vaccine is 100% compliant. A double shot vaccine, what percentage won't come in for the second shot?
Right.
What does that mean? So people are right now, no one's talking about that. No one except us right now. Everyone's focused on efficacy, 95%. Great. That's going to shift to safety. Which one can I inject into my kid? That's a great luxury to have 7 shots. I want the one that's safe, a lower dose level, perhaps one that's convenient because I live in Wanatucket, Kentucky or something. And I don't want to drive 6 hours to get my first shot and then 6 hours again to my second shot. If I'm going to do it once, one shot is more convenient, more compliance. And then there's others that will care about other variables. The cost of
about this issue, by the way, of the cryogenic nature of the transport. I mean, and are we looking at, are all of the messenger RNA based vaccines the same in the sense that they require super cold temperatures?
There's 4 messenger RNA vaccines, like from publicly traded companies right now that are in the clinic. And they all of them are frozen liquids or in the liquid form as a product. Arcturus is the only one that's intending to evaluate a lyophilized version of the product in phase 3. And lyophilized means you remove the water. So it's just a powder remaining. Now, why that's very important is water is the culprit. Water is what degrades RNA. And so if you remove that, the stability profile is way better, shelf life stability and cold chain. So that's a point of an area of differentiation.
So then you're using powder as opposed to liquid that requires special care.
Yeah, like minus 70 centigrade freezers, dry ice handling. There's concerns about phase transition. If you have a frozen liquid that begins to melt, you have to use it or lose it. You have to use it or discard it. Where if you have a powder, you can take it out of a fridge or something. And if you don't use it, you put it back in the fridge. Nothing's melting. There's no dry ice. And so this is not only convenient here in the first world, we'll call it, in the US and Europe, but consider what that's like in rural areas, in other areas of this planet, where a liquid formulation is just not feasible for some areas, honestly. So it's important to widen the scope of the applicability of vaccines by having different versions, like a powdered version that doesn't require this extraordinary cold chain, or again, a single administration will make that simpler for certain areas of the world. And so Arcturus, of course, is excited because we're fitting a lot of these concerns as a second wave type vaccine and we're hoping that we can help as many people as possible.
I think to add to Joe's point, Marshall, when you do cold chain logistics and you're shipping things at these temperatures, you have other logistic issues that come up. So you might be able to deliver it to the pharmacy, but then it sits on the shelf as the pharmacist tries to load the shelves up, and you potentially could affect the product. There's a lot of things in there. So what he's talking about is really critical, that it's going to potentially solve that issue. It's also very costly to do cold chain distribution. Yeah. It's a big
plus the training, I would suspect. You've got a whole issue of training of the supply of the distribution channel, so making sure that for each of these different versions, there's going to be kind of a different training that's required from the vendor. That's going to be rather complicated, I think.
I just want to get into a little bit more of the longer term issue, which is one, because I'm fascinated. We were contacted by Singapore because I've been a consultant to the Singapore government many years, and they've had this experience with these repeated kinds of pandemics, SARS and the others. Is this going to be something that we're going to be living with as societies? That because one of the things that's been remarkable is how the Asian countries, particularly Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, have managed to handle this better than the Western societies, because we didn't have this experience. Can we expect that this is going to be an ongoing saga where every few years we're going to have another pandemic? Because as a historian, which is my background, basically pandemics come in waves and you get them one after the other historically. So is this something that we're going to be seeing over and over again? That, in other words, it's not going to be, well, we solved this and now we don't have to worry about it anymore?
In a word, yes. This is a global pandemic. I wish I could give a rosier outlook, but COVID-19 is here to stay. It is not going anywhere. We haven't even eradicated polio yet, and that's like a 99% effective vaccine that we've been trying to take care of forever. There's no way we're eradicating this. I think it's reasonable to say that it's here to stay, but the good news is it's a coronavirus. It'll likely be a seasonal vaccine once a year, very similar to what you've seen the flu experience. So this is going to be very easily managed, but it's not going to go away anytime soon. To establish herd immunity, you're going to have to get a lot of people agreeing to be vaccinated. There's only like 50, 60, 70% of the people that even want to be vaccinated. So we're not going to be establishing even herd immunity for a while, let alone eradicating COVID-19. But it's okay. We just got to make sure that it's managed properly. And we're going to have plenty. Usually there's one or two vaccines. We're going to have several vaccines to choose from. And that's a good problem to have. But
what have we seen as the virus has mutated? Have we seen kind of the range of mutations be within kind of predicted values, in the sense that you can easily change the vaccine to accommodate the mutations? Or are we seeing kind of, off the charts changes that require greater amounts of resources to respond to?
The mutations that you see with the common cold or the flu are irrelevant for COVID-19. The messenger RNA vaccines express the entire full-length spike protein. So that imagine a big long string of protein, and if the mutation is here, 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 or here, it's okay. We're still going to be covered. So from very strong theoretical perspective, as long as you're expressing the full-length spike protein, we don't have any concerns with COVID-19 mutations. Having said that, if there's some sort of extraordinary mutation that means SARS-CoV-2 or CoV-3 comes about, and it's dramatically different, the mRNA vaccines are now even going to move quicker. And what do I mean by that is we've already validated all the delivery, the manufacturing. All we have to do is switch the payload, and that's very simple. So the time to getting a vaccine prepared next time is going to be a lot more efficient. And I think people are going to be stockpiling vaccines before the pandemics even break out, In 2015, the WHO warned governments to stockpile against coronaviruses. In 2015, we had a 5-year warning from the WHO, and everyone ignored them. And I did too. Everybody did. No one, until a plane hits a building, nobody changes how we do things. And so this is just a disruptive historical event. And I think people will now stockpile, not large amounts of vaccine, just small amounts to quickly address, quarantine, and just snuff out little outbreaks before they turn into a crazy pandemic. If Wuhan, China would have had 10,000 vaccines ready to go for that local area, then it would have been snuffed out, let alone, and then we could prepare millions and millions much faster than 9 months or 12 months. We could do it in a few months and get the vaccine ready to go much faster with mRNA. The clock speed for mRNA vaccines, once they're validated, is extraordinarily fast.
Hey, Joel, going to a question you asked about, there's multiple vaccines coming out. I'll make a quick comment and maybe Joe can add some commentary on this. Even if you have multiple vaccines out, I mean, the positive for society is you have vaccines out. That's the good thing. But I think with the data you collect over time, you'll start to understand which ones are more effective and which ones are not more effective. You'll learn more about your distribution chain, what's more effective in getting them there. I think Joe brings up a really good point about, do you take two periodic doses of this in order to fight it? We're going to learn all that. I think there's still a lot of data that's going to be captured based on the demographics of the clinical populations. And once it's deployed out, your sample size is going to grow so much, you're going to really learn about effectiveness and maybe even modifications of these vaccines for the future. So I think it's hard, I don't know, with the current data that we have. I mean, they work. You can probably make an assessment about maybe this one's better than another one, but I think the total population of data will give you a better answer about which one is actually more effective and what modifications you need to make on the dosing. So I don't know, Joe, if you have any comment on that.
No, I think that there's different types of vaccines that are going to come forward, and people are going to get more familiar with the data. And there's going to be a generous amount of data being provided and published and be able to be reviewed and studied. This will serve as a benchmark for future pandemics without question. We're going to learn a ton about this. That's the really good thing, is it'll help us in future pandemics. That there is some of the vaccines out there are delivered using a virus. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, the body recognizes the delivery technology, and the next time it sees it, it'll chew on the vaccine before it does the job. And so that's one aspect of the mRNA vaccines as well, is the vaccine is delivered with a non-viral delivery technology that the body doesn't see or recognize. So the next time it's injected, the body doesn't chew on it before it does its job. So having a repeat dosable, like a multi-dosable single shot vaccine that is utilizing a non-viral delivery technology would be something that people are looking closely as you look beyond the pandemic and in the endemic phase. Everyone right now is focused on the pandemic. We also have to prepare now for the endemic phase, because for all the people that got certain vaccines that cannot be redosed or not multi-dosable, they're going to have to transition to something that is. And that's all going to have to be managed tightly, or else we're going to have these mini outbreaks in different countries, and it's just going to be a pain. And people the economy will be sensitized to these little outbreaks of COVID-19.
So I am very, listening to you guys talk, I'm very encouraged that the cumulative weight of the data that we're collecting actually does some good. That we're building kind of a corpus of knowledge that gets better over time. It doesn't just, like what seems like the rest of life has always been historically, which is you make the same mistakes over and over again. We may actually learn from our experience, and that's very, very encouraging.
And I just like to add that's also a civilizational issue. I'm not a technology guy. I'm a history guy, and one of the things about pandemics that happened over and over again, like we interviewed Kyle Harper, wrote The Fate of Rome, that talked about pandemics in those terms. If we can stop these things from happening over and over again, it's the only way to really save global civilization. Because if we just keep getting pandemics one after the other, look what's happening in the developing world, look what's happening to our society, look what's happening to our kids. So I think, you know, what you're helping is not just a medical problem, but a social and civilizational problem. The Roman Empire never recovered from plague, never. And the Renaissance was almost destroyed by the plague. So this is really a great moment if we can find a way for science to solve a problem which has humbled other civilizations in the past.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah.
Definitely a great point.
Well, Tony and Joe, thank you so much for joining us on the Feudal Future podcast. This is one of those moments where I think, as Joel just said, we may actually not have a feudal future when it comes to this. We may have very much of an optimistic future. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your continued efforts. And we wish you all the best of success and health.
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
See you, Tony.